Well, if some of you were here all the way at the beginning of our talk, it seems quite a while ago now, our series in Revelation, you might remember from the very first talk, I asked us whether the book of Revelation was introducing us to the end of the world. Is that what this book is about? And I said, no, it's not about the end of the world. It's about the completion of a project, that God has begun this process of creation with an end product in view that he is just, I think, very, very eager to see it be completed, although he is not constrained by time. But one of the things that we talked about in that first message was about the various pieces or components of the universe or of mankind and creation that God has to bring to completion before the story is finished, before the project is done. And today we come towards the latter part of the book of Revelation. We're really now into the last 6 chapters, and today's topic is about world empire and the end of religion. And today we're going to see some of the final pieces of the puzzle that God has to deal with before the whole story is complete. And I have to say that it's a little bit easier in this topic for today to speak in generalities than in specifics. And as I've studied this passage for a long time and pore over it again and again and again, I'm leery about going out on a limb and making identifications or anything like that. But the Scripture does speak for itself, and at least the big picture we can get. And so that's what I hope will happen for us today as we move into this second last talk called World Empire and the End of Religion. The first reference in the whole book of Revelation to what I am identifying as religion is this word Babylon. And I want to read you this first time in the whole book that the word Babylon is mentioned. And then what I plan to do today is basically read again 2 chapters. And so some of our time is just going to be hearing the Scripture, but then I'm going to be stopping at various places, not trying to deal with all the details by any means, but try to identify the big pieces and help us see how this whole section is going to work together. But here is the first mention of Babylon in the book of Revelation. And another angel, a second one, followed. So now we're in Revelation 14, and we did talk about this when we were there. Just towards the end of this chapter, or I guess the middle of this chapter, it introduces us to 3 angelic beings, and they make 3 declarations. The first one is a proclamation of the gospel to the whole world. And we'll see that this is introducing the last half of the tribulation period and the 3 things that need to be accomplished in this last period of the tribulation. First is a great movement of the gospel. And we talked about survivors last week. So that was the first angel. This is the second angel that we need to focus on today. And here's what this angel says. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. So what we have to do today is identify who is this. It's a female, she, and it's Babylon the Great, and we know that Babylon is the name of a city. We have to try to identify who is this and what it means that she has fallen. The third angel, which I don't have for us to read here, was that said, and if anybody receives the mark of the beast or worships his image, he also will drink of the cup of God's wrath and will be tormented forever and ever. So the 3 things are the gospel's preached, Babylon the Great is going to fall, and anybody identifying with world empire is going to pay eternal punishment. So at this point, God, I said, he's drawing a line. And you either accept the gospel or you bow to the beast and your destiny to eternal judgment is finalized. And then in between those 2 is this woman, Babylon. So what I plan to do today, usually I like to give 3-point sermons and follow, those of you that know me. Today I can't really organize it in points like that because we're just going to read and go. But I want to give you 4 questions that I plan to address as we read this. And these questions aren't going to be in order. These are just the things that we're going to be looking for as we go through these chapters. So number 1, I've already mentioned, okay, who or what is Babylon the Great? We want to try to identify that. Again, I've said I'm going to be more general than specific. Number 2, why has she attracted God's special attention? What is so important about her that at the end time when God finishing his project, and you have the gospel and you have the Antichrist and people have to be on one side or the other, who on earth is Babylon that she is so important in the middle of this final struggle? Number 3, what are we supposed to do about her? And you'll remember, or at least you may remember, that the very beginning of the book, first or second verse, says this: "Blessed is he who read, and those who hear the words of the prophecy, and heed the things that are written in it, for the time is near." The whole point of doing this book is to hear what it says, and then to do what it says, to heed. So it's a good question. Okay, what are we supposed to do about Babylon the Great? How do we, as Christ followers, or even not Christ followers, what should we do? And then the last question, what is going to happen to her? What will be the outcome for Babylon the Great? Now we're going to, that was chapter 14. Now we're going to the end of chapter 16, where we are introduced again to Babylon. And I think this is the second mention of her. "And the 7th angel poured out his bowl upon the air." So where are we? All right, I said that the seals, the 7 seals, were kind of creating the circumstances and the expectation of the tribulation period. They unfold into 7 trumpets, and they are 7 kind of warning judgments that are restrained and not complete judgments. And the 7th trumpet opens into the 7 bowls. And the 7 bowls are where God finishes his patience and pours out complete wrath on the earth. So when we get to 16 and verse 17, when it says the 7th angel poured out his bowl upon the air, it means we're already at the end of God's wrath. In a sense, the 7 bowls of judgment have been poured out. "And a loud voice came out of the temple from the throne, saying, 'It is done.' And there were flashes of lightning, and sounds, and peals of thunder. And there was a great earthquake, such as there has not been since man came to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. And the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell." So this is like collapse of the world, really. And here it is. "And Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath." Now, one of the questions that I have when I read that is, are we talking about a sequential set of events? In other words, the 7 bowls are poured out and God's wrath is finished on earth as a whole, and then we move to another phase of judgment, and this is particularly on the Babylon the Great? Or is this a flashback and something that is also going to happen while the 7 bowls are being poured out? You know, do the 7 bowls last the whole 3.5 years? Or are these, and then these are concurrent? Or are they poured out and then Babylon the Great is judged? The best I can do, and it doesn't really matter if I'm right or wrong, the best I can do from reading this passage is that it looks to me like it's sequential. It looks to me like the Antichrist and his kingdom is put through this terrible, terrible time of God's judgment, these bowls being poured out. And during that time, Things like darkness is poured out on the throne of the beast, and nobody can see anything, and there's great pain associated with it and sores, and it doesn't really say why the pain is there with the darkness, but it's just there. And the water is all turned to blood, and all the grass and trees are burned up. So you're looking at a world that has pretty well been destroyed. And if it's sequential, that means that the Antichrist and those who are following him have just endured this terrible time, and they come out of that perhaps with hope of rebuilding or finding life again. Human nature is to hope, and we press on. And if that's the case, then something happens now that isn't the direct pouring out of God's wrath, but it's to complete God's judgment upon humanity. Let's take our first, I should just finish reading that. And the great city was split into 3 parts. The cities of the nations fell, and Babylon the Great was remembered before God, to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Let's take our first stab at who Babylon the Great is. We first meet the word Babylon in Genesis chapter 11, and there it's translated the word Babel. It's the exact same Hebrew word that goes through all the rest of the Old Testament. So by the time we get into the book of the Kings and the prophets and the Psalms, and we read about Babylon, it's the same word as Babel. So really, the root of Babylon is planted. The seed is planted in Genesis 11. And those of you that know the story of Genesis know that that was when man has come out of the flood. The 8 individuals, Noah, his wife, and then his 3 sons and daughters-in-law come out. The world is repopulated, but probably not massively so, just enough to start to get a feel for civilization. And they all get together and they say, lest we be scattered all over the world, let's build us a city. The tower will reach to heaven. And let's make a name for ourselves. This is man's first attempt at civilization and at religion. And it's when they say, let's build a tower whose height reaches to heaven, there's got to be a sense there that this is trying to connect us with God. Now, the reason that I think I can say that with some confidence is even though God interrupted or interfered with the building of that tower, archaeology has produced for us many of these massive city structures. They're called, and I hope I put the word up there for you, a zikkurat. And if you would like to know what a zikkurat looks like, just make note of how to spell it. Sometimes it's Z-I-G-G instead of Q-Q. And go on the internet or in the encyclopedia and look it up, and you'll see various pictures of these towers that have been uncovered by archaeology. So when God stopped the building of this tower at Babel, he didn't stop man's desire to have his own religion. He didn't even stop this pattern of building cities whose height reached to heaven. What he did was he forced people to fan out into their family groups by their languages and to start multitudes of civilizations. And it's interesting that everybody went out and built their own tower. We can find them in most of the ancient language groups of the Middle East and further east. These towers come out in really the first forms of human civilization. And one of the things that we see then, and anthropologists discuss and argue about to this day is, does religion produce civilization, or does civilization produce religion? And while they can't seem to answer that question, this is one thing that anthropology pretty well agrees on. Every civilization is religious. You don't find human beings building a culture without building religion. And I know you can think of maybe the odd exception, like Marxism believed that religion was the opiate of the people, and so they tried an experiment with no religion, and they may just have created their own religion, only a religion that the state is God and God is not God. It's very hard for human beings to live without religion. And so when we begin to see, well, what is this city, Babylon? It looks like it's human effort to establish security, to establish reputation, and to establish a religion that represents them. And sure enough, in the ancient world, when any nation would go against war with another nation, it would always be in the name of their gods, and it was to prove which god was stronger, their God or our God. And if you read in Isaiah, for example, when Sennacherib comes to Jerusalem and he speaks to Hezekiah and his people, he says, which of the other gods have delivered their people from my hands? Who is the Lord that he will deliver you from my hands? It was all about their gods, and really that's the story of human history, is man finding a way to build a tower to heaven, find a way to get to God. And this Babylon the Great is now remembered before God. We have to take a step back and think about, what does that mean? Why did God make man anyway? What little clue do we get in the Garden of Eden? Every day God went to fellowship with Adam and Eve. In the cool of the day, he went to walk with them. And he didn't mind that they had a spouse. And he didn't mind that they were going to have children. And he didn't mind that they would have a job, which was looking after the garden. He expected them to live a fully human life. He actually created it for them and blessed them and said, it's not good for you to be alone. Be fruitful and multiply. He blessed them. But this one thing, walk with me. Have fellowship with me. I made you for myself. And in fact, he so made us in his image that we can kind of feel what kind of a relationship he wanted with mankind. As we get towards the end of this book, we see the great celebration of the Son of God and his bride. The whole story of the Bible has been a romance. It's been about God finding a bride for his Son. It's about God finding a people for his name. And so that when we fall in love and make a lifetime commitment and get married, and that's consummated by human physical intimacy, we're just getting a human picture. We're getting a metaphor of how God longs for people to be in love with him and to be one with him, and that your life revolves around him. That's what he made us for. And just as we can experience that, and to a greater and lesser extent, we experience the joy and beauty of it, because I'm not unaware of all the challenges of marriage and relationships and so on. But to the extent that we can enjoy it, we can also feel the pain when that relationship is broken, and when you're betrayed by the one you love, and when you're now feeling torn in half because that one who promised you that they would be there for you and they would be faithful to you and there would be no other, and you find out that they have been unfaithful and there is another. And nobody can describe your pain if you've gone through that. Nobody can look at you and realize the depths of your soul's anguish when you're hurting because your partner has cheated on you or has swapped you for somebody else. And think of God. He just wanted us to be able to identify with what he's doing so we would understand it. He made us to know him and to love him. And man starts to build another. He starts to build a substitute for God. He creates his own religion. He tries to find his own way. All routes lead to God. I don't need the Son of God. I don't need Jehovah. I can find my own way to eternity. And we're going to see what happens to this Babylon the Great, who becomes almost the heart and soul of every culture in every generation, a human manifestation or expression of religion, to the great hurt of the heart of God, who wants us to love him with all of our hearts. So now I begin in chapter 17 and 18, lengthy passages to talk about this Babylon the Great. Now we're introduced in more detail. Revelation 17, starting at verse 1. One of these 7 angels who had the 7 bowls, so the bowls have been poured out, came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here. I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." Oh, so now God is identifying for us the nature of this Babylon, and he's using that term, harlot, prostitute, the one who causes unfaithfulness, the one who steals the heart of God's lover for herself. And no wonder we're starting to see, well, why is this important? Well, something for all of time in every generation, every culture and people and language, something has been stealing the heart of God's beloved one away from God. And so God can't finish this project without dealing with this great harlot. It says she sits on many waters, and we'll come to that in a minute. Or in a bit, with whom the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality. Oh, there's another very important dimension of human civilization, and it's this. The way that rulers and kings and despots, the way that they get power over their people and control their people is to try to control their religion or try to represent their religion. I suppose the best picture we got of this was when the Roman Republic turned into an empire, so that it was now run by a king or an emperor instead of the aristocracy. It was now a kingdom. And one of the names that Augustus adopted was Pontifex Maximus, which means chief priest. He became the highest authority in all the land over the traditional gods of Rome and of Greece. He was very smart. We saw it in Revelation chapter 2, where the church of Pergamum, they were told, "I know where your throne is, I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is." And we talked about the Emperor Constantine, when he realized that the whole empire had gone Christian, or so much percentage of it, mainly in the cities. There's no point in him anymore being Pontifex Maximus over the traditional gods, because nobody's worshiping them. So he switches gods, and he suddenly becomes a Christian. And he suddenly says, "I saw a dream," and it said, "With this cross conquer." And so now Constantine embraces Christianity. Now, to the extent that Christianity might have been genuine, if Constantine truly was a genuine believer, then this isn't a relationship with the harlot, but it is using religion to help him be a good governor, to help him have power over the people. And that was that marriage that, as we saw in Revelation 3, became the downfall of Christianity, because it became associated with power, and it was no longer free just to be Christian. What is it that threw the Shah of Iran down? It was when the Ayatollah Khomeini came and became a great religious leader, and he got all the people to follow him, and he had power because he was able to control their religion. If we were to study culture after culture, and look in the Far East of Buddhism or Islam there, the governors tend to want to be the religious leaders. This is saying that the kings of the earth were the first ones to throw off a true relationship with God and embrace human religion, committing spiritual adultery for their own purpose, to establish influence and control and power over their peoples. If you look in South America, all the leaders want to embrace some form of Catholicism or some form of religion. It's just endemic in humankind. And you're sitting there thinking, well, that's good because we're an exception in North America, right? Our leaders don't do that. Well, don't be so sure. Stay with me. And those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And that is to say, people became so involved in religion. They poured their hearts so much into it and believed what the religious teachers were teaching, that they would do things that made no sense at all. They would live in ways that were extreme or immoral or just not sensible. Why would you have a culture that would believe in incarnation, reincarnation? And therefore you wouldn't hurt a rat. You'd let a human being die before you would hurt a rat, or you would let a beef cow live rather than feed human beings. What is it that turns people's hearts so that our values change so radically that we're not thinking straight about life and about humanity and about creation? So the kings of the earth taking advantage of religion for their purposes. The people of the earth becoming drunk with religion and what it teaches. So the angel said, I'll tell you about this. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Where have we seen that before? Well, that was the beast that represented the 7 kingdoms of the world throughout human history. And where is the woman sitting? Right on the back of the beast. That is to say that if you were to study any kingdom in human history, there's going to be religion there helping that king have power. Somehow there's going to be this relationship with religion that creates political strength and influence. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. Go to the poorest country in the world and then visit one of their temples. And you see all the poverty around, but you go to the temple and you see gold and gilded architecture and idols made of precious stones and pearls, and those who are involved as the priests having advantages that nobody else has, and how religion has taken to itself the control even of people's money. And we'll see more of that. And having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. We have to stop there for a minute. This is accusing, God, from God's point of view, this is accusing religion of, yes, being adorned beautifully, but having a gold cup full of immorality and of the abominations and harlotry of the earth. Where does that connection come from? After all, isn't religion people trying to find God? Isn't there piety in religion? And certainly you can find piety in religion. Some Buddhist monks and their attempt at piety. But here's what's happens with religion. Unless humanity has absolute standards, humanity cannot follow righteous living. It's not possible. Those of you that are 50 or over, or maybe even less than 50, and if you've lived through Canada or lived in the States for 30, 40, 50 years, has our morality changed since 30 years ago? Have we rewritten the rules? Completely. You look at our world now, and the things that even in university they taught were wrong and aberrant, now they're just accepted and celebrated. We have completely changed our rules. At the same time, we were drifting away from God, who established holy standards. And even you and I need those holy standards. They tell us what's right and wrong, whether you feel like it's right or wrong, whether the world's saying it's right or wrong, whether it makes sense to you or not. None of that matters when you have a holy God telling you this is what's right and this is what's wrong. And you drift away from that firm stand, and religion and humanity moves together, and you get to the place in our culture where everybody will tell you that whatever your religion is, it's fine. Because all religions are equally valid, and all will take you to heaven. So I don't mind that you're a Christian. I don't mind if you're a radical follower of Jesus, but that doesn't turn my crank at all. It doesn't interest me one little bit. I have my own religious beliefs. And guess what? I also have my own moral beliefs. And I have my own standards. And don't talk to me about them either. They fit perfectly with my religion. And so as our culture has completely let go of God in the sense of Jesus Christ and following him, and we've let go of his word, as our religion is morphing into every possible shape there is, so is morality morphing into every possible shape there is. And we justify our behavior because in our view of God, this is okay. The God I believe in, he doesn't mind this behavior. And before you know it, religion is excusing any kind of behavior or standard that mankind embraces. So ultimately, this marriage between civilization and man-made religion doesn't take us to God at all. It takes us to man. It takes us to what we want, and we create gods in our own image. We read on. Upon her forehead a name was written, a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. As God sees religion, he sees what I've just been describing. Not only is she drawing people's hearts away from God, she is leading people to live immoral lives. The most inexplicable, the thing that you could never connect in your head in ancient religions, and I'm not so sure about modern religions, but in ancient religions, often there were temple prostitutes. Can you imagine? It became part of their religion that you would go to the temple, you would pay money, you would be with a prostitute who was a holy prostitute, and the whole purpose for doing that was to practice a procreative act and invoke the gods to come and cause your fields to grow with lots of harvest. It was all about trying to bring the gods to bring fertility into your world. And you would go, imagine, worship God in prostitution and pay for it in the temple. That's the extent that it went in ancient times. Very, very common thing. And when God sent his people in the conquest of Canaan, it was those kind of abominations where he said, you've got to destroy those people. They've come to such a place of immorality. Don't marry them. Don't mix with them. They're going to change your morals. They're going to change how you live, and you'll depart from God, which is actually what happened to Israel. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And God says, yes, from my point of view, as I watch my martyrs, from my own son to the people who lay down their lives to follow my son, it's usually religious people that do the martyring. It's usually religion that hates the Christian, the follower of Jesus. I have more to say about that in a minute. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come out of the abyss and to go to destruction. So this is actually has to be referencing not one of the 7 heads, but the 8th head that John had seen earlier. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen. I think these are kingdoms. 1 is, so I would assume that's Rome, the Roman Empire. The other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. Now, I'm not prepared to guess what that represents, whether it has been or whether it's yet to be. When he comes, he must remain a little while, so that's the 7th kingdom. And the beast which was and is not is himself also an eighth, and is of the seven, and he goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. Now, I want to pause there for a minute. I said I'm not sure that I can even try to identify exactly what's going on here, but I think I can take a stab at what it's looking at in the end times. 10 horns, which we saw in chapter 13 at the beginning, have the diadems on them. They've moved from the heads to the horns. So power has gone from the 7 world kingdoms to now the 10 horns. And these 10 horns are somehow going to help create this last kingdom, the 8th. And look at how long it lasts. They're going to receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. One of the things that I have noticed about the book of Revelation as I've been studying it carefully, and I'm getting to the place now where I can go through the book quickly in maybe 2 hours, and it used to take me sort of weeks to go through it. And the book is getting smaller and smaller, and now when I can go through it quickly, because that's why I keep wanting to see the big picture. Here's one of the things that I'm seeing in the big picture. The book of Revelation, between chapter 4, verse 1, and chapter 18, verse 24, that whole section moves very quickly. It seems like a lot. It seems like too much to take in. It's going like this. It's just moving very fast. And when you think about the Antichrist coming in, he's in the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, and he works his way to a throne. Who wants to be king for 3.5 years? Nobody wants to be king for 3.5 years. Actually, what the anthem for Britain, God save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen, God save the Queen. And she's had her 60th year, and everybody celebrates. That's pretty good time, 60 years. This Antichrist gets 3.5 years to come, to start, to build his kingdom, and to be wiped out. One of the things that I see in the book of Revelation is this is God accomplishing his purpose, and it's just happening like this, just very fast. So the Antichrist does not have much of a reign at all. He only accomplishes God's purposes. And when those are done, and God's finished with them, he's gone. And that's one of the things we'll see here. So when they remain for 1 hour, it's just emphasizing this is a very fast thing that's going to happen. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So we're going to watch, okay, there's one thing that they're going to do. This 3rd kingdom, this 8th kingdom with the Antichrist and the supporting group, that they're there just for a flash. There's one purpose. Let's watch for it. 14 gives us a clue. These will wage war against the Lamb. Why would they do that? Why would they be so antagonistic and hostile against Jesus? Why would they want to do this first and foremost? Well, because he's the great competitor. The Antichrist wants to be worshipped. He wants all attention for himself. And so what he wants to do is eliminate any competition, and the first and main one will be the Lamb. If I could throw down the Lamb, I could really have attention. And it says, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are the called and chosen and faithful. So it's a reminder, this is going to happen quickly, and let me tell you, those of you that are on the side of the Lamb, we already know who's going to win this. It's going to be a struggle. This is a tough period we're coming through, but the Lamb will overcome. Plants hope in our hearts right from the beginning. And he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So there's religion everywhere, every language, every tribe, every ethnic background. This is where this false religion resides. And now look, and the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot, and they will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose. We're getting it now. What's the one purpose for this momentary existence of the Antichrist and the kings that will support him? The one purpose is to tear the harlot to shreds, to destroy her, to eat her flesh, and to burn her up with fire. God has appointed this almost maniac religious leader, the Antichrist, wants all worship for himself. He is going to take care of world religion. That's what this is saying. These last 3.5 years, yes, it's going to be tough for the survivors we saw last week, but God is going to deal with the great harlot. So we read on. And by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. Isn't that cool? Only a moment. I just want you to do what I have in mind, and then it's all over. It's not what they think, but that's what's going to happen. And the woman you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, when John wrote this, let's say it was towards the end of the 1st century. So what is the great city that's reigning over the kings of the earth? It might have been John's natural inclination to think, that must be Rome. The great harlot must be Rome. That would make sense in a way. And that has led lots of conservative Protestant teachers to say that the religious power that resides in the Vatican, in Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, is going to be revived in the end times. I have to say that that does not make sense to me as I read the scripture. And here's the main reason. Where is the woman sitting? She's sitting on the beast, right? And the kings of the earth are committing immorality with her. They're using her for their purposes. If Rome is the 5th king, it can't also be the harlot that's sitting on the king. See what I'm saying? It can't be the same person or the same character. So when I read this, who is this great harlot? It's the great city that's reigning over the kings of the earth. I don't think that that is any particular physical city. I don't think it's anything to do with the Church of Rome. In fact, I think the Church of Rome is found, as I talked in Revelation 2, the Church of Thyatira, and the Lord claims it as his church. It's his church. He's going to deal with it. So I come and I say, well, the great city then that's reigning over the kings of the earth has to be this symbol of world religion that starts in Babel and Babylon the Great. So it's this human effort to find God. This is a great, invisible, but very powerful city. This is human civilization in the sense of building religion. And this is what reigns over the world in John's day and in our day. So we keep reading. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, listen to this, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Now, when you think of that, you think, okay, is it collapsed? Is it over? No, listen. She's become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. And birds in the parables of Jesus often represented Satan coming and stealing, for example, stealing the good seed that was scattered on the ground. This is saying human religion, for all its intention to climb to heaven, to connect us with God, ends up becoming a dwelling place of demons. It ends up becoming ugly idols and places where demons are moving in and actually interacting with people and leading them to a spiritual experience, but not a spiritual experience with God. And it says, for all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her. And The merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. A whole new dimension is just added there. She's the one who before was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. But now the merchants of the earth are getting into the act, and they're making big bucks out of this harlot and what she's doing. We got to try to figure that one out. How is that happening? And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you may not participate in her sins, and that you may not receive of her plagues." Now, I have a really, really difficult question to answer there. God says to his people, come out of her. What are his people doing in her? What are they doing having a part of the great harlot? What does that mean? Come out of her, my people. Well, I want to suggest a few ways that it happens. For example, if you went to Haiti, where there's a lot of Catholic Christianity, you would also find a lot of voodoo. And you would find that it was almost hard to find the line between the voodoo and the Christianity. It's called syncretism, where God's people, in his name, adopt things from other religions. If those of you that are from the Philippines have told me to be very careful about embracing the Roman Catholic Church that I tend to try to do. And you've said because in the Philippines, you should see all the stuff that goes with the Roman Catholic Church that's not Christian and it's not pure. It's called syncretism. And God's looking at his world, at these great world religions, and even the Christian ones, maybe especially the Christian ones. And he's saying, my people, you're compromising. You're bringing in the devil, the world religion, and you're mixing it up with my faith. You've got to come out of there. And so he's warning his own people, if you're involved in any religion, in any church, in any manifestation of Christianity to start with, and it looks half Christian and it looks half non-Christian, come out, my children. Come out of there. Don't stay there. You've got to find a new place to worship. You can't serve God and serve idols. You can't eat at the table of the Lord and the table of the demon at the same time. Come out of her, my people. There are also great efforts in mission circles these days, and I'm not enough involved to know. But where do you draw the line? Let's say that you're a Jew, and your family says that if you accept Jesus as the Messiah, we're going to have a funeral for you, and we never want to see you again. The huge temptation, and I can hardly speak to it because I live in the freedom of Canada. The huge temptation is to hide that you now believe in Jesus and to go through all the Jewish ritual and just to go through all the things that your family does and to stay part of it and worship God secretly. They're exploring that in Muslim world where it's so costly for a Muslim to come to Christ. And so even missions, the philosophy of missions these days, is there a way that we can allow people to stay sort of in the structure of their culture and of Islam and still be a follower of Jesus? And listen to why it says you must come out of her. It says, for her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back even as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mixed twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. I'm not a widow. I'll never see mourning. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine. And she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. God says, I'll tell you why to come out. I'll tell you why to be separate. because that world system, that religious system, is responsible for so much sin that I'm going to destroy it, and you don't want to be part of that. You don't want to be part of her sin. You don't want to be part of her judgment. Come out of her, my people. But now we move into a section that has made me think deeper about what it means to come out of her. It says, "And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, 'Woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come.'" Now, how does that happen? We know who's appointed to do it. It's the Antichrist and the 10 kings. So it's this last empire that's demanding all religious allegiance to itself. And so it wants to destroy all other religion. What does that look like in real life? Is there actually a city that's going to fall? So I don't know if any of you know the name Grant Jeffrey, but he's passed away now, but he was a teacher on prophecy, and he wrote a book called Apocalypse, The Coming Judgment of the Nations. And he actually said that he thinks there are 2 Babylons. There is a religious system that I've kind of been talking about, but there's also an economic system. And the city that falls might be one of the great financial capitals of the world. Well, that's interesting. He really wrestled with this next part, but what's it look like when Babylon the Great falls? Read on with me. "And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over here because no one buys their cargoes anymore." It means that the world's economy has collapsed. Why are the kings of the earth weeping and mourning? Why are the merchants of the earth weeping and mourning? And here's the next question, more importantly. How does Babylon the Great, how does world religion control the economy? What is the link between religion and economy that when religion fails or it's obliterated, the world economy is also obliterated? What is the connection? So I've done as much research as I can. I've gone on the internet, usually my quickest place to go to university studies and so on, to see what do the people who study believe the relationship between religion and economy is. Does religion give birth to economy? And there is a slight connection, but it's not the one I was looking for. The slight connection is this, that when man creates civilization and adds religion to it, there's usually a sense of stability. And when there's stability, there can be economic development and economic growth. So there's a certain connection between religion and economy, but not this connection. Let me just keep reading it, and then I'll finish my comments. "The merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep, cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives." We see cargoes of human lives. I just see jets flying all over the world, and their cargo is people. And this is saying, nobody's doing this anymore. The mass system of shipping and trading and the world economy, nobody's doing it anymore. What happened? "And the fruit you long for is gone from you, and all things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. The merchants of these things who became rich from her." So picture all the stock traders in New York and all the stock traders in Toronto and Europe and everywhere. Everybody who's getting rich from this massive economic motion in the world, it's all gone. They'll stand at a distance because of the fear of her torment, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city. She who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold, precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour such great wealth has been laid waste. And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor and as many as make their living by the sea stood at a distance and were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she has been laid waste. Well, let me tell you what I think is the connection between religion and economy. This harlot of false religion, of human religion, has morphed from shape into shape into shape as time has gone on. And her last morph is money and wealth. The great harlot has become money. In the end times, she exists. People worship money. And if you think that this is not biblical, read Ephesians 5:5. It says, a covetous person who is an idolater will not share in the kingdom of God. Covetous means love of money. And just look at Canada right now, or look at the United States. Our leaders, our prime minister or our president or our governors for the state, we have an election coming up in Ontario right now for our premier. Just watch their campaign and ask if they address any issue other than economy. Do they have one thing to say about morality? Do they have one thing to say about what matters other than money and maybe the poor and the standard of living? The great God, the great human religion of the end times, it's the thing that has trapped the church, because the Laodicean church is the one that thinks she has everything and she has nothing. She has all the money in the world, but she has nothing, God says. So the last appearance of the great harlot is money. And the whole world right now is chasing after money, better standard of living, financial security. Be sure you have lots for when you retire. Don't think about Jesus coming. Don't trust God for your daily bread. Be sure that you have everything. And we're all chasing it. And the kings of the earth now are committing acts of immorality with her now. And they'll trade almost anything if they can have power. And people are chiming to the sound of money now, to the economy. And when the Antichrist comes and he wants all attention to himself and he wants to be the only one worshipped, he doesn't care if you're poor. All he cares is if you worship him. And so if he has to destroy the economy, he doesn't care about that. And this harlot, so picture now when she's burned up with fire, picture temples and places of religious history and value and even governments, picture them being knocked down and destroyed by the Antichrist. And picture great banks being blown away and towers where all the trading happens. Picture them falling and the Antichrist destroying everything that human beings love, because he says, I want you to love me. This is your only option, to love me. In fact, you know, when we saw where he caused, you have to have his mark on your hand or on your forehead to even buy and sell. Imagine that's going to slow things down. Economy's not going to work very well when it's that carefully controlled. He is going to destroy the economy. So yes, the kings of the earth and the people of the earth, but also the merchants and all the people that were getting wealthy, as this great prostitute who has stolen the hearts of man from God. And when you get to the church of Laodicea, wealth has stolen the heart of the church away from its Lord Jesus Christ. So much so that he says, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. So what does it mean then when it says, come out of her, my people? Come out of her. Don't you live for that God. Don't you let your life revolve around wealth and economic prosperity. Let your life be wrapped around me. Don't count your wealth by how much you have in the bank. Count your wealth by how much you've been able to give to my kingdom. When you come to church on Sunday, let your most joyful moment be the offering. When you get to give, if God has enabled you to give, and you, first of all, you give your tithe, but you're finding you can give more, and you can pour your life out for the kingdom of God and seek his righteousness, and you come out of the great harlot who's trying to win the souls of God's people in the world to worship now money. And God's going to raise the Antichrist and the false and the kings and the false prophet to destroy all worship. And the great last God is the God of money. And it's going to go down. And it's going to go down fast. And everybody's going to watch. And nobody's buying anymore. Nobody's selling anymore. And there's no more bank accounts. And there's nothing more to live for if that's all you've been living for. And listen to what it says. Rejoice. Can you do that? The whole economy has just collapsed. Rejoice over her, my people. Rejoice, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. And a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, thus will Babylon, the great city, the great harlot, the religion and the idols that have stolen the heart of God, money that's stolen the heart, not of God, stolen the heart of people from their God. It's all thrown down with violence and will not be found anymore. The sound of harpists and musicians and flute players will not be heard in you any longer. No craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer. The sound of a mill will not be heard in you any longer. Don't go to the nearest temple to get married. It won't be there. No celebrations there. No music there. The light of a lamp will not shine in you anymore. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. That verse made absolutely no sense to me. Are you kidding? The blood of the saints and the prophets and of all who have been killed are found in the great harlot? You're going to blame religion for all the killing? Well, directly, yes. There's been lots of it. There's been, in Ireland, Christians killing Christians. In the Crusades, Muslims against Christians, Christians against Muslims. In India, Buddhists against Hindus against Christians. Yes, lots of killing in the name of religion. But what if you add to religion money? What if you add money as the last morph of great human religion? And you think of all the drug cartels. What's that for? Money. And you think of the underworld. And what's that for? Money. And you think of all the killing that's done for money. And you start to see, oh, when our hearts were taken away from God, we became very evil. And just like our morality is drifted away from God, you drift away from the real and true God, and you don't have the same value for life. You don't hear the command, thou shalt not kill. So mankind changes when he finds another God. When we get to our talk next week, it is so exciting that all of this happens quickly. God brings it to an end, and there's a new heaven and a new earth. There's peace at last. There's God's final purpose. The marriage happens. God takes his people. My hope in this series is that you will be part of those people and that you won't be caught, for example, in this great harlot. That even your life now will be represented by living for Jesus and for no other and for nothing else.